I like put the settings really low, so hopefully that'll just make it a little bit better quality.
Maybe it will
Or
be a whole 2 pixels.
yeah, hopefully. Let's see. It should be back up now, I think.
All right, hey stream. I can't see the stream itself. I can only see the comments right now. But hey comments, can you see us right now? Send me a nice little message if you can.
I hope so.
Now I wait. I got a smiley face. I think that means yes.
Oh wow, we look real bad quality on my phone at least, but it looks... Wow, that's very low quality.
Um, Too low quality? Everyone, are you okay with it looking like we're filming from a potato, or?
It kind of looks like it's a, what's it called, a stop motion film? I don't know.
Excellent.
If anybody has experience with OBS, Open Broadcast System Service, let me know what you'd
The
recommend.
audio's better,
That's good.
and it's apparently much better, so I guess we'll go with this.
Alright.
Apologies for the really miserable quality.
Sorry about
If
that.
you can hear us, if you're watching this in the future and not during the live stream, I have no idea if the quality is going to get better, so maybe just pop this on in the background and
Yeah, maybe don't worry about the video
just
too much.
don't watch the video at all.
But,
Even those of you that are here right now, maybe do that as well.
but like we were saying before, we read Robin MacPherson's. We're not sure how to pronounce your last name. I'm so sorry. MacPherson, maybe. His How to Maintain Languages. We read the ebook version, but there's also a paperback version available, and there are links in the description if you would like to purchase the book. I will, not sure how we're gonna do like a spoiler-free book because it's a non-fiction kind of guiding book, but either way, no matter what we say about it, I definitely think reading it is a fantastic experience, and definitely support the author. Go to his YouTube channel, his Patreon, if you like what he has said here, because I'm just going to be right out with it. This is my favorite book that we've read so far, and
Out of the whole three.
out of the whole three, and just any books that I've read on language learning, like this one has at least spoken to me the most and has given me the most advice that I've like kind of finished reading it and have gone like, I can like apply this to my language learning right now, you know?
I agree. I'm gonna give it a 5 stars on Goodreads. I always hold my Goodreads review until after we've done the live
That's
stream
clever. That's
to
clever.
build suspense. But it will be getting a 5 stars from me on Goodreads.
How generous.
I really
of you.
liked the book.
Yeah,
I
and
know
also
how generous. I really loved the book. It's also my favorite, probably, language book that I've read. Honestly,
Same.
I haven't read a ton. I'd say maybe I've read.
You've read more than me.
Language-related books.
Yeah.
Total.
You've read more
But,
than me, but this is my favorite out of everything
From what
I've
I've
done.
read, I've really liked this one. I felt like it offered stuff that hasn't been said in other books, which I think is a big thing for me, because I
Yeah.
know we talked about this last week with or last month last book club, really. It wasn't even last month, but the how to learn any language while having fun, or whatever the exact name of that book is. I felt like it offered a lot of points that had been made in a lot of other books, and I feel like that's pretty easy to fall into with language learning books, just because they're kind of they focus just on kind of the same general points a lot of the time.
Yes.
And I feel like this book offered
This had something new, you know?
new, and also presented it in a way that I hadn't seen before. So like one of the things that I really liked was the layout of the book.
Yeah, the graphic
How it
design.
was structured, but also with like there were pictures and illustrations, like little comics and stuff. And honestly, I really liked it. I feel like it added a lot. I do feel like I didn't get the full experience of that reading it as an ebook, because it would be, whereas I could tell it was supposed to be like a picture and then the title page for the next chapter, I would just like swipe and it would just be a picture, and then it would just be like the title page instead of like having them side by side. So I think there's definitely like a benefit to reading the physical copy of this.
Definitely.
If you can. But the ebook was still good.
No, I totally...
It's also a very quick read. I think it took
Absolutely.
me total because I didn't want to like take breaks, so I ended up reading it in one sitting, and it took me genuinely an hour to get through it. I am a quick reader, but it took me only an hour to read the whole book.
And also,
So,
every chapter has a kind of summary of what happened in the chapter. So if you really don't have time, you can just read the summaries. But honestly,
true.
it like takes the same amount of time
If you want to
to
go
read the
finish the
page.
book before this live stream is over.
Yeah, no, you honestly could.
So, also for anyone who hasn't come to one of our book club things before, we will be watching the chat and kind of talking about things that you guys talk about in there, but anything that's not book club related, we won't talk about. So, if you have just kind of general questions for us about our language learning, save that for our next just kind of general live stream, or put it in the comments of one of our videos, or tweet us, or mention us on Instagram or something. But here, you can feel free to give your opinions about the book if you read it. Any comments about things that we're saying from the book, but we won't be answering things like, oh, how is like learning this language going, or like any tips for this. Just so hold on to those deep in your hearts. So yeah, I really liked the book. I feel like a lot of things were also things that either I'd kind of already like started doing or tried to start doing, or things that
I noticed a few things that you've been talking about.
Yeah, so it was nice to see that it like kind of aligned with that, and then there were things that I hadn't thought of. So it was like a nice like collection of that, but since I think some of my ideas fell into the same line as his ideas, I feel like it was nice because I feel like we have a similar kind of approach to language learning, and also similar things helped us. So then when he suggested points, I was like, oh yeah, that really would work for me. I just hadn't thought of that. So that was nice. I also, the one thing that stuck out to me is like first page, he said like learning a language is half the battle, and like I agree.
No, totally. And also just I just wanted to point this out, like I don't think I was talking to someone before about this book, and I was just like, there are not lots of books, at least that I've come across, written for polyglot language learners, or like language learners who would tend to learn multiple languages, and especially maintaining languages. Like this is a problem that you and I have been tackling lately, just in our own language learning. And like this book couldn't have come at a more perfect time in our just journey of polyglotism, and just you don't have books like this typically, you know? Every book is either geared towards a beginning language learner who's like a monolingual typically, who just wants to learn one language and that's it. But this took everything into account, and like most of it does kind of focus on one language, but then I believe the last two chapters definitely are like, okay, if you're a multilingual language learner, like let's do this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I actually had a note to myself like halfway through the book. I was like, all these examples I'm getting are just someone who's maintaining one language, and like I know this guy says that he has taught himself, or like he's taught himself 7 languages, so he can speak 8 languages. And like he taught that over 7 years, so that's adding like a language a year, and somehow is maintaining all the others. But like I'm not really getting information on how to do that. Like I guess you could do these, but it seems like it might be overwhelming to try and apply these tips that he's giving
but then
for all of these languages. And then I like, as I was about to be like, man, this book could have really reached it for me, then he was like, here's how to maintain multiple languages. So I was like, oh great,
and thanks. He also did the thing that you suggested recently, which was like adding one a week or once a day. Like he does that thing of slowly adding them, like you were trying to do. And I definitely think that totally worked here, and I'm excited to try that myself. And just like, yeah, how do we go through this book? Do we go through by chapter? What do you want to do?
I mean, I took my notes on this book in chronological order just because I just did it as I read it, so it might be easiest to kind of go in chronological order as well for the sake of us.
That sounds fantastic.
But I guess my final review thing is that I just feel like it also explained things really well. I feel like it's a really kind of approachable book, because I feel like oftentimes if it's not directed at necessarily like people who've never learned a language, or also if it's maybe trying to reach both polyglots and people who have never learned a language, some of those books have a tendency, I feel like, to kind of like overcomplicate the way that they explain things. Definitely. And I feel like this book not only explained a lot, like even things that maybe I didn't have a clear definition of,
like intensive and extensive reading.
Even if I kind of like already knew things, or just like intrinsic knowledge and that sort of thing. It was just like, it was all explained very well, and even the points that he kind of like created, like ideas that he had, also explained in a way that I totally clearly understood, while also being directed at people that have already learned languages. So I also felt like it wasn't dumbed down, which was nice.
It balanced that line really well, which is something I think that's hard to do, but like it was very clear and straightforward, and he didn't repeat himself really. It was like you say one thing in the simplest way that you can and then move on. And like, and you know, maybe I suppose the the ending like reviews almost made it feel like, here's what we just discussed type thing, but like it was really helpful to kind of solidify it. But I enjoyed how it was written. It was very straight and to the point and succinct, and I loved it.
Yeah. So I guess let's just start.
Okay.
So I guess we'll talk about kind of points to help you. You can take some of these from the book, and then we'll also talk about like how they apply to us. I know I made myself genuinely a list of things to kind of do to get my like language learning together after reading this book.
Yeah, I went and I'm like doing content libraries now and doing all that.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing that kind of stuck out to me was just the 3 stages of learning idea that he presents.
Yeah.
Which is that
was really
there's
interesting.
like 3 stages of learning: the cognitive one, where you're still kind of like
you have to think about everything
really
very hard.
Studying and learning things, and then the associative, where you can kind of like have conversations maybe when it comes to language learning. You can
kind of see the connections between words.
Somewhat secondhand, but it like if you were to stop, you'd get pretty rusty, and also you do have to kind of think about things still.
Yep.
And then there's autonomous, where you're kind of like speaking like your native language, let's say. And so I thought that was really interesting, because I feel like when it comes to language learning, a lot of how we present our levels in languages is like
beginner, intermediate,
through the CEFR scale or through beginner, intermediate, advanced. But I feel like we never really talk about it in terms of like cognitive, associative, and autonomous. But I almost feel like that's a better way to look at it.
Absolutely.
Because I feel like for me, I almost can view that kind of spectrum a little bit better and more as a spectrum, whereas the CEFR scale, even if I say like, oh, I'm somewhere between a B2 and a C1.
Like this is much more like I'm still here, I'm doing this,
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because I feel like I can kind of place myself where I would be in each of my languages on that scale pretty well.
Absolutely.
So I think that's pretty interesting.
I feel like, I don't know how aware we were, or at least I was, of my dead time before this. This book spends a large amount of time talking about dead time and explaining it to you and what it is, and then literally walking you through how to recognize the dead time in your life, and shows you different schedules for like 3 different kinds of students. And it was funny because there was one student who was a German student who was the same type of major I am, and I was like, is this me? It's me. And I was like, I can take this schedule and do it for myself. Which was just so cool, and I need to still go through and like figure out. I mean, it's hard with my dead time now because I'm not working right now. But when I'm back at school, I'll have a bunch of dead time in between classes, and I'm excited to use this. It's all so applicable right away.
Yeah, so I actually wrote down a quote when he was talking about dead time, which is, honestly, like, I really love this quote, and I think I'm just going to start, like, shooting this out at people when they start telling me I'm a little too busy or something.
Oh, yeah,
like
totally.
Which is, people who succeed in their endeavors do so in spite of their busy schedules, not thanks to a lack of it.
Yes.
Or lack of one.
Snaps.
I stopped writing somewhere at the end there. I just wrote lack o, so it's lack of something. But I really enjoyed that quote, because I feel like a lot of time I have a lot going on, obviously, during the school year, and I feel like there's always that kind of idea that like perhaps you're taking on too much, or like perhaps it's better to pull back a little bit, whereas I've kind of always felt like having kind of a more blocked in schedule, like doing a little bit more, ends up pushing me to do more.
Exactly.
Almost.
I totally relate to that.
And I feel like this quote kind of put into words at least kind of like perhaps why that is for me.
I find at least that when I'm in the university like regime of life, essentially, that like I do have more motivation to pursue personal projects rather than when I'm at home not employed. And that's a personal thing for me.
Yeah, I definitely don't kind of have that experience, which is part of why I'm like, oh, I'd love to be self-employed, because
no, I know we're different that way, because like I like to work around a schedule, whereas you're like, I can create my own schedule,
Yeah, I mean, I think I just feel like when I have kind of other things going on, I end up like putting more energy into that, I guess, as opposed to, I just have too many personal projects that I'd like to do, I guess. So that it doesn't. But
so does he. So does he too. Like, languages isn't the only thing he does. Like he said in this book, I took 7 months off language learning to write this book, and I'm about to go use all these principles to reinvigorate my language learning.
Yeah, I just think that in that case, though, he had to take the 7 months off of it. What I'm saying
Yeah,
is, like,
no, exactly, you're right.
I have so many projects, then it's so much easier to balance all of those projects, obviously, the more time that I have. So I'm able to kind of push myself a little bit further there when I'm not kind of in the university system. And also I'm able to kind of structure my time, which is always helpful for
No,
me.
of course.
Um, but yeah, also another thing that I just liked about the book in general is that he provided then a planner for Deadtime.
Yes,
So
that
there was
was
like
fantastic.
resources provided in the book.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Deadtime, basically for anyone who doesn't know, is like time when you couldn't be doing something else almost.
You can't really be doing active study during dead time. It's mainly passive, as far as I was able to glean. You
Yeah,
know,
so it's time like when you're like riding a bus, like if you're commuting, if you're
transport,
waiting in line at the grocery store,
doing dishes,
um,
laundry,
doing dishes, doing laundry,
going for a walk.
working out, going for a walk, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So, um, if you make use of that dead time, you end up finding so much more time in your day to be able to learn a language.
Exactly.
So, um, I think that's also where it comes the difference for me of like personal projects,
Mm-hmm.
self-employed versus personal projects, not because language learning is something you can put in during dead time, but is making videos for Polyglot Progress something I can do during dead time? It is not.
Exactly. Exactly.
um,
It becomes much more sustainable when you view how much dead time you have. You know. Because we
So
view language learning as like, I need to throw in these amount of chunks of time in a day, but when you see how much of that you can put into your dead time, it really opens up so much more of your schedule.
yeah, so basically it just shows that even if you have a full-time job, if you're if you're a student who also is doing other things,
Mm-hmm.
all those sort of things, you still have enough time to kind of put towards maintaining and even studying your languages.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so dead time wise, I'm gonna actually write myself up a little
As am
list, I
I.
think, of all of the dead time that I feel like I have, both for summer, and then I'll probably try to think of what I usually have
For school.
um during the school year. It's hard to say when you have different classes every semester, but
Yeah,
I
I'd
think
say
I can
like
think of things that are
walking between
generally dead
classes.
time for me, like walking between classes. I'm gonna do that no matter what my schedule is. Or like cleaning my room. I'm gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
do that no matter what my class. Like I do that no matter what
Yeah,
the semester is like.
working
Um,
out, going for
doing
walks.
laundry, like all of
Oh
those things
yeah.
that are things that I have to do regardless of what my semester looks like. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe I have more or less of that depending on the semester, but it's still dead time that I can make use of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I also just like that he mentioned that like the activities you do during the dead time really depends on you and what you enjoy doing and what your goals are and things, because
Yeah.
again, that's just something that we talk about a lot on Polyglot Progress. There's really no way to learn a language because everyone has different goals with the language, has a
Mm-hmm.
different language they're studying. So I enjoyed thinking
I
that
love that. I love that. He never was like, these are the answers. He goes, this is what has worked for me and some of my students. You know, and he takes a very personal approach to how to solving these problems with his students. And he has the one example of the kid who wanted to learn Japanese, Spanish, and French, I believe, and also wanted to do pool and something
and
else.
piano.
Piano. Pool and piano. And he talks about how like creating a tier system of prioritization.
Yeah, we'll have to
Prioritization.
get there. I think we're getting there later, Matt.
Yeah. No, of course. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Gosh.
Um, Jay says sometimes I need the dead time to just give my brain a break, which I also agree
I
to.
totally. Yeah.
Um,
You can't pack everything that you do in a
yeah,
day with
I think that's the
busyness.
thing is I think for me it's going to be kind of figuring out where I have dead time and figuring out some things that I can do during that dead time.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously it's going to come down to the day and how I'm feeling that day. Like if I feel absolutely miserable and burnt out and I need the 5 minutes I'm in line grocery shopping, then
Just
I'm
to
going to take
breathe.
the 5 minutes in
Yeah.
line grocery shopping. But if I have 5 minutes in line grocery shopping and I'm feeling well enough to do some languages, I think pushing myself to use that dead time and not let it just be me standing there when I'm like, I really need to get going. Like, really don't want to be here right now. Got so much energy. Like, then
Mm-hmm.
I might as well put it towards something. And like Andy said, even using some of your dead time can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Um,
And
just because I think there's a lot of dead time that we don't even think we
Yeah.
have. Like, I'm
Yeah.
also planning, after reading this book, I'm planning to get I was already kind of thinking about this in the past, but I also was like, I feel like this is going to throw me into an existential crisis. But then I read this book and I was like, I think I need that existential crisis. So
Yeah.
I'm going to get, there's an app there's probably several apps like this, but I know of one, and I don't know its name, sorry. But it's like an app that monitors when you're on your phone. And so it tells you how many hours a day or how many minutes a day, how many whatever a day you're on your phone, and I believe what apps you're using as well. Because obviously if I'm doing like language flashcards on my phone, like,
but like if you're on social media,
I want to cut out, but because that's the whole point. But I think being able to see how much time am I on social media, how much time am I playing some random phone game, and being able to kind of like limit that a bit. I've already been trying to do that. I know that, I think this is Deadtime almost everyone has, unless your life is like really together. Most people like wake up in the morning and go on their phone for like at least a little while, or like will be on their phone before they go to bed. And I think very few of us are using that time explicitly for language learning or
like a productive habit in general.
Yeah, so I think that's one of those things where at least for me, I've been trying, like, I wake up in the morning, and personally I can't like wake up and then jump right out of bed because just doesn't really work for me. But giving myself like a few minutes to wake up, because usually when I wake up I'm like half awake, but waking up and kind of giving myself a few minutes to like come to consciousness in my bed and then getting out of bed, I've been trying to use those moments on my phone to kind of like either do some flashcards in another language or do something that's I don't know, just kind of something that's more productive than that. So that's one thing that I'm planning to implement after this, so I'll keep you guys updated on whether that works.
I also wanted to mention, because I talked about before how Deadtime is mainly passive, but that's not entirely true. He does have a whole chapter on active skills and Deadtime, but I'm not sure how you can integrate writing in Deadtime, but he talks about speaking and how kind of just talking, the art of talking to yourself is what he calls the chapter. And just, this is something that I've done before, but I haven't done it sustainably. I just do it every now and again to like, if I'm talking to my pets, just being silly, or like, but you can actually achieve a lot this way. And he talks about how recording yourself, and so almost doing like diaries like we do, but literally just going like kind of stream of consciousness, and then you can kind of pick up on the gaps in your speech and the words that you don't know. And this is something that I found incredibly helpful in the past, because like I'll just be going and saying whatever I can, and then I stumble and I'm like, I don't know that word and I can't get around it, but I just have to like, okay, blank, and I go forward, you know? And then so when you review this and you find these gaps, you can then fill them in, or you know, you look up the word and then record it, things like that. But yeah, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's also like just a really interesting thing that I think I want to try to implement almost a little bit more in my diaries, is just stream of consciousness.
Me too.
Consciousness kind of speaking, because I filmed a video the other day. Basically, I had this weird thing happen to me where I woke up. This was like 2 weeks after I got back from my internship, so it's not even because of that. But I woke up in the morning I was like working, so I got up at like 7, which is earlier than I usually get up, so I was pretty tired. But I woke up, I was exhausted, and for some reason, all I could think in was French, and I was having the hardest time like actually being able to think or speak in English, which I don't know why it happened, but just so happened to be that way. I usually code switch in my head while I'm thinking, like that's kind of the way my brain works, is I kind of code switch between English, French, and whatever other languages are kind of present enough in my brain to be code switching between. So my like stream of thought isn't just English. But I woke up for some reason and it was just entirely in French, and I was also feeling like filming a video. So I filmed a video in French, and I always plan out what I'm going to say in videos ahead of time. Like I don't necessarily script it word for word, but I at least give myself talking points, because otherwise I ramble and there's no point to the video. So basically that's what this video was. There's really no point to it. I talked about a whole variety of things. And so I've been like, do I edit this? Do I try to find some sort of like theme within this like ramble and cut it to that? Or do I just like cut out the lulls and let it be this kind of like weird stream of conscious, like just chat in French? That really makes kind of almost no sense, because I just jump from topic to topic. Because I was also exhausted. And so I think this like reading made me think like, oh yeah, I should do that, because I think there's definitely a benefit to kind of not having a point almost in your language practice. Like obviously that can help to kind of like structure you a little bit, but I think it's interesting just because also I know when I practice my writing, I usually give myself a theme, like I'm going to talk about my daily routine, or I'm going to talk about a friend, or I'm going to talk about how my day was or something. But I almost think I should try writing as like a stream of consciousness thing as well in other languages too, and just be like, my house is gray. Also, this happened to me today. Also, I like to eat this, and just like kind of practice as much as I can and see what happens.
Something I really enjoy, which you might like, is just following the ability of my language to make as silly a story as I can.
Because I was actually suggested that with my goals video, because
and he talks about that in here.
How I have a hard time journaling, which he also talked about, because it's something that I can't really keep up in my own language, so it's hard to then make that work in other languages as well. But he kind of said, I got a comment that was like, try like creative writing instead. Like what I do is I write stories in other countries, and I have the
I saw that comment
entirely in the language, which I think is a great idea for me, because for anyone who might be new here, I'm like a film student, so I'm writing scripts all the time. I might as well set those scripts in other places and have people speak, like have it set in Italy and have people speak Italian, even if the whole script's not in Italian, have the dialogue be in Italian, and then I can put like a little subtitle thing. But I thought that was a good idea. And also, speaking of writing, he mentioned like a language exchange partner and a pen pal and things, which I think most of us have heard of. But one thing that I guess I hadn't thought so much about is blogging.
Yeah, blogging.
And I mean, I guess I've thought about that. I've seen people blog, and
because also you don't need to share it, but you can.
Yeah. But I think that that's an interesting concept, and so I started kind of thinking about it in terms of myself. And so what I might try to do is just on the Polyglot Progress Instagram, like post more photos, caption them in other languages, just because I think that's an interesting concept.
It's essentially the same thing as blogging,
Yeah, it's like and it's also like the same thing almost as me writing a journal entry. It's just then I'm kind of like posting it to the internet, but it kind of feels to me at least like it has more of a purpose than just sending it to a language exchange partner. I've talked about that before, but I kind of don't always like my interactions in languages to be language based. I really like when things are like kind of applicable to like real life almost. So like I enjoyed with my like internship type thing where I was speaking French all day, but it wasn't in the context of a French exchange. It was in the context of I'm on a film set and everyone on this film set speaks French, so you better speak French. Or like when you're like in a country and you have to speak the language, as opposed to like, here is your French exchange partner.
Like, those situations get very tiring very quickly.
So I think the idea of a blog for some reason just feels a little more right for me personally.
It sounds really good.
I don't know.
Yeah. Something to move away from Deadtime, he talks about he has these fantastic systems for dedicated study time, which I'm really fascinated with now, and I really want to try to implement one of these into my life whenever I can, so like as soon as possible. He talks about like I have it right here, the content chunks and the content cycles, which like oh my gosh, I need to try to find an example because it's difficult to explain, but I think
I might be able to explain.
You think so? Okay.
So for the content cycles, basically it's like if we use a novel as an example.
Yes.
There's like 4 steps to it.
I love this. So
basically like the first step is to like, let's say you're going to read like a page of the novel, I guess. So you'd first read the whole page all the way through. That's like the first step, is to read your whole chunk of content all the way through. Or like listen to the whole chunk if you're going to do like a film or a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stick to the novel because it's a little bit easier, but you can apply it to basically anything. But you're going to like read the whole page all the way through. Then you're going to read through the page and like highlight and make notes of any
look up idioms you don't know, all the grammar.
Yeah. Anything you don't know, and take a dictionary and like learn those words. Then you're going to make flashcards for
those words.
Or whatever works best for you, some way to study those. So if you want to make yourself like an italki course or something like that, you're going to
memorize. Yep.
And then you, after you've kind of like learned those words a little bit, is you're going to reread the chunk of content. So basically that's how you get through like a page in a novel, for example.
I watched a video of his talking about doing this, and because he has a YouTube channel, by the way, I linked it down below, and he talks about doing this with the Easy German YouTube channel, where he hadn't studied German in a long time, but he created memorized courses for phrases and sentences that he didn't know in certain Easy German videos that he'd made like a playlist for himself and had the transcripts and like took words and idioms that he didn't know. And so he watched the series through, and he's like, after coming back to the language from quite a break, and didn't like recall a whole bunch of it. Then he studied his memorized course for a little while, came back and watched it again, and all of it was like he knew it all along because he refreshed it right then and there. And did you hear that?
No.
What was that sound effect that just got?
I did not hear a sound effect.
That was weird.
Yeah, I think also an interesting thing that I think is important to touch on is like with dedicated study time is like the concept of like making time.
Yes.
Basically the way he writes it in the book is like, oh, so how will we like use the dedicated study time that we've made space for?
Yep.
And so I think that's important. And basically then he brings up the concept of like morning being the golden hour or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
Which I have some feelings about. And I think I've talked about this in other podcasts.
I quite agree. I'm a very much a morning person, but the thing is, I'm a morning person and then I like to go back to sleep, which isn't sustainable. So recently I've been trying to do exercise in the morning, and then I go from there to language learning. Or at least go from there to work. So if it's editing a Polyglot Focus video, like I exercise and then work. Because I like to do that. And it's just, because exercise I feel like will boost my mood and boost my productivity. And, it gets all the endorphins flowing. And so that's kind of become my thing. But also back when I was in high school, that's what I would do, is I would get up early to have like language study in my day and then go to school. But
I think also just schedules are so different. And so I think that's kind of why I don't really love when this is like the like suggestion that everyone kind of puts out there in kind of like the productivity like world. And I understand why it's what's thrown out, but I don't think it necessarily works for everyone.
It doesn't have to.
Kind of, I feel like, but I just feel like it's presented that way sometimes. Like in this book, basically the reasons he says like the morning is the best is because like you can't procrastinate then. Like you get up and you do it.
And then you have the rest of your day.
Like, as you've got like a busyness and a lack of control throughout the day, which I definitely agree with. Like once you start your day, people just kind of like other things come up and it's harder to get things done.
Yeah.
But then he was like, also, I haven't met anyone who's started implementing waking up early who hasn't ultimately loved it. And so I think it's just important to note that morning doesn't have to be the way that we make time. Like for me, I'd much rather stay up an hour later than wake up an hour earlier.
Really?
And that's just because I find when I wake up earlier, I am so much more tired. And I know, like, you might be like, oh, but you have to get used to that. Like, for a month, just, like, go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. But it's just, like, I end up being so much more exhausted, so much more anxious. So, like, just in general, I find that my internal, like, body clock, I definitely get more done and, like, am much more able to like do the work that I want to do if I stay up later and sleep in later, as opposed to the like wake up as early as you can and then go to bed early. Like I just find that doing that ends up having kind of a negative effect on me almost.
That's so interesting. I'm totally the opposite, but okay.
So I just think that's an important thing to note is like possibly try both. Just because I think it's always pushed like, oh, just like wake up earlier. But I think for some, possibly staying up later is actually the way to go.
Okay.
Maybe some doctor is going to come after me in the comments for that, but and I think it depends on your age, honestly. Like I know that younger people,
true biological
like their body clock
real.
is like different than, so possibly in a few years when I'm like more of an adult, I suppose, I'll be like, I love waking up at 5 a.m. but currently
see I like waking up early and I like getting to sleep early, that's just how I function, Man, can I say more after a sentence? It's not even like
I think One thing that I am gonna try that's almost sort of like how you were saying you like to wake up early and then go back to sleep. I'm trying out this year, and so I'll keep you all updated as to if it's a sustainable thing. I tried this year getting mostly morning classes, despite me being like, I can't wake up early. Um, so I'm gonna get up early, go to class, and then come back and take a nap, and then wake up again and have the rest of my
like
day.
a second
almost
day.
like every day I get 2 days, because I found that almost kind of works for me too. Because some days are just like you've got so much going on that it is long, and by that point I don't want to stay up late. But then I don't have that time for dedicated study. So something that I noticed kind of like last semester was when I did have like a morning class and then took a nap and then did something later in the day, like Fridays this past year, I had like an 8 a.m. class, then I'd take a nap at like when that ended around 1. Yes, that is an insanely long class. That's how long all of my classes are. So after like 1 p.m., I would take a nap and then I'd wake back up for my Spanish lesson, which was at like 4. And I found that really worked for me because then I was able to go till like 10, 11 p.m. at least, and like get everything else that I wanted to get done. So I think this year that's what I'm trying out. I'm gonna try to have like 14 days in a week. We'll let everyone know how that goes.
I'm very interested to how that's going to play out.
I've heard that it actually is like slightly better for you though, in a sense, because I know there are people that literally do it as in like they're awake for a few hours and then they nap for like 20 minutes.
Well, also we can just look historically. I feel like there's so many countries that have a.
There are a lot of countries with a siesta, so that's why I'm gonna basically try to really that's the real
that's
way.
That's the word. You should have said.
Weird concept for me because I'm American.
Yeah.
But essentially, I'm gonna have a siesta this year, and I'll let you know if I'm more productive.
I look forward to it. That's going to be
in which case it's really actually, come to think of it, not that great of an experiment because we could just look at other right now. But yeah, I'm going to be a siesta having night owl that also wakes up early because of the siesta.
Nice. So next I wanted to talk about something that you've done successfully before, and then we'll move on to something that I've talked about and failed in before, but he has a much better way of doing it that I'm looking forward to.
Are you moving on to the 7 habits of highly effective language learners, Matt?
I was actually skipping past that, but we can talk about that first. Because I was talking about... Right. Wait, actually, no. I think I'm on that. Language tracking? That's in there.
That's, I think, a little later on.
Okay. We can talk about this first.
I mean, we can skip over a lot of this because this isn't what stood out to me the most in this book. It's definitely worth reading, I think. Basically, he takes the 7 habits of
highly effective
people, I think is the name of the book. But that book...
highly productive? Highly effective?
That book.
Okay.
And basically applies them to language learning.
Yeah.
So also you could pretty easily probably find those 7 habits online and then think about how they work for you in your language learning. Someone says, as someone from a siesta country, it usually decreases productivity in the long run. Oh, great. Well, nice. I'm gonna gotta try it for myself first. But, and I mean, worst case, then I just have to be a morning person.
Yes. Highly effective people. Thank you, Andy.
But yeah, highly effective people. And I'd say I honestly just look those up on your own. But what I found more useful is after those 7 habits, he kind of gave his own personal habits that he uses that are like help him be a more effective language learner, like always having what you need to study on the go during your bedtime, which I think is
this is important. Like having MP3 files on your phone or just like downloaded flashcard decks, whatever works for you.
And that's what you were talking about having like a content library as well.
Exactly. So and this, I'll get onto that when like we get there. But like I'm trying to right now, like I have this Italian podcast that I'm like downloading the audio of and the transcripts of, and I want to have on my phone or on my laptop so I can have them with me in some capacity. And then I'm able to do them wherever I am. And I want to have this with like every language so that way whatever I need at whatever time, I have some sort of educational content that I enjoy and am looking forward to using wherever I am, and I can just do a little bit of it no matter where I am.
So yeah, just kind of making sure you have everything, and which I think is definitely great. And then also being like organized for your studying, which is something I already try to do, like already knowing what you need. But I think especially for like audio things, like having playlists, I think that's
This
definitely
comes into the
something
content library.
like, kind of like
Yeah.
organizing, like making myself a nice updated like German music playlist and
Me
things like
too.
that.
I've been working on that.
Just like listen to exactly what I need at any given time.
To,
Also developing a strong morning routine or just like a
Mhm.
routine in general. I've like recently I've heard so much about how good it is to have like a strong morning and night routine.
Mhm.
And so I definitely think I want to try to apply that because in general,
Absolutely.
like routines sometimes don't work for me because I like to kind of like change certain things each day, but
Mhm.
I think what will work for me is having a set morning and a set night routine.
Mhm.
And it's just like throughout the day, things can change. Like one day I can focus on one thing, and then another day
Yeah.
I can focus on another thing. Also, like my classes can change and things, but it'll be like no matter when I wake up, like no matter when my classes start that day,
Mhm.
whether I need to wake up a little bit earlier or like I'm getting up a little bit later or whatever, my morning routine will stay the same. Like I'll have to do the same things in like the same kind of set order and things. Um, and I think that'll also allow me to kind of make the like most out of the time that I have because I'll know like, oh, I should only be spending like 10 minutes, let's say, getting dressed. So like if I've been standing here
Mhm.
like for 45 minutes, like not not being productive here. Um so
Mhm.
that's definitely something.
I do want to talk about the organizing your content. I know this is a later chapter, but because you just mentioned it, something that I struggle with, and it's probably really silly, is when I sit down to study a language, sometimes I spend most of my time trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And this is something that takes away so much time, and it's one of those things where, like, you can feel like you're doing more when you're actually doing less, because, like, you're like, oh, I've spent all this time getting to study, but you haven't done anything. So having, like, a plan and having the content library, so that way you know these are the things I'm working on and have the options to do. Do I want to read a novel? Am I going to read this newspaper, do this podcast, watch this show? Like you have these set things that you can go to and that you're progressing in, and you don't have to. You have options, but they're all there. You don't need to search for them. It's like, okay, what am I going to do today? And then if you have a schedule that determines that, it's even less stress. Because right now I don't have any of that set up.
He made a there's like a some images of some like kind of like content libraries essentially that he made himself on paper, which were kind of like everything that he was doing for each language, and he'd highlight them as he finished like let's say like a chapter in a textbook, things like that.
I'll show an example of them here just so you can see it, and they're fantastic. And I've tried to do this before with like just to track my process and say like teach yourself French. I would just write the chapters out of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through 20. And then I check them off as I go. But this has everything you're doing, every course, every book, and like I think it's just so much more effective of a system.
It's a little hard to see, but basically it's like the chapter numbers for textbooks and things.
Yeah, or like the Babbel courses is what he's got going on here.
Yeah, Matthew, it's basically like listing the courses you're doing and like basically the levels or chapters in the courses, or like if you want to listen to an album, like the songs or whatever. Just kind of checking them off somehow as you go along.
Yep.
I think I'm gonna definitely implement that as well in my joining bullet journal. Don't have anything like that in there yet, but I think that would be helpful. Also, I think a spreadsheet would be a really good way to go for that. I think
Definitely.
I just tend to making a spreadsheet can end up taking more time for me and being less productive, just because then I'm like, how do I align this the exact way that I think of it in my head and that sort of thing. And also just like scrolling for some reason like irks me and stuff. So that's why
I want to have
do
this
a lot
on
of my
paper.
planning on paper. Is I end up like thinking too much about like the layout, and then it just like it might look like I spend more time on the paper, but it actually like takes way less time for me.
Also, the thing I like about this is it gives you that sense of a to-do list, and he actually talked about that, like as you can see yourself progressing, and this was my whole idea behind like writing down the thing of the Teach Yourself course that I did ages ago that failed and I didn't stick with it. Is you see the progression not only through you're going through the book, but like you're checking it off every chapter you do, and like there's that you shouldn't do it just to check it off, because that feeling like and like someone just commented like doing it for the sense of productivity, not for the learning, like that's the wrong mindset to have, and it's hard to get around that, but it can be a good motivator to see yourself progressing. I can't speak today. And
and then just also I think going along with that, he made the note of like not spreading yourself too thin, and not as in like spreading yourself too thin with too many languages, but not spreading yourself too thin with like the number of courses you're trying to take.
Absolutely.
Which I think is something I definitely struggle with, and I think
Me too.
This was the part in the book where I was like, I know how to fix my like problem with maintaining languages.
Yeah.
And I think it's really that like I have so many kind of things that I feel like I should be doing, because I'm like, I need to like keep up with my listening and my speaking and my reading and my writing, while also like keeping up with that for all of the languages, while also like learning this other language that I'm currently like working on. I'm more in the cognitive stage with, and so I need to like learn it first.
Yeah.
But I think this really helped, because I was like, okay, so first I should like, instead of trying to watch like a French show and read a French novel, I'll
just do one.
read a French novel and then I'll move on to watching a French show.
Exactly. And this works with the content cycles also. It's like you're doing one thing for a set amount of time, and then like you're done with it, you move on to another. Yeah,
so I think it's super helpful that I can now do that, but I'll have them all kind of on a sheet of paper, so that way if I'm feeling like, you know, I'm about to do dishes, I can't read my physical book right now, but I can watch a show. That's when I can be like, okay, I'll watch a show, but after that, like, I'm gonna get back to my reading is my main focus right now.
Exactly.
And then also, just the other thing, he talked about making like an immersion bubble, which I think most people are probably familiar with. Immersion is definitely something that gets tossed around a whole lot on Polyglot Progress and every other Polyglot related channel on YouTube, of just like surrounding yourself with like foreign TV and foreign news and
but this was a very interesting like success story of not going to another country and becoming like totally immersed, you know?
And I think the way that it was possible is he made sure to say that your like transition to an immersion bubble should be sustainable and gradual.
Exactly, because he used a very interesting allegory where he was like, it can kind of be like an organ transplant being rejected by your body if you just stop, if you cut out English cold turkey, which I really liked. I think that's very accurate, and I've never heard it put that way before. I really like that.
I did as well, and I feel like that also something I really need to think about with my language learning, because I think a lot of the time I'm like, time to immerse. Like, I guess everything I listen to can now be in Spanish.
I do all German now.
Like, yeah, that's like, I guess I need to listen to a Spanish TED Talk while I get ready in the morning and then read a book in Spanish and do all these things. But I think the thing is that you can still enjoy things in your native language. In fact, you probably should still enjoy things in your native language. So I think that's like an important note. And even if you do want to cut out your target language entirely and have it just be what you speak while out with others, or if you live in the target language country, then you just never want to speak your native language or whatever, I think it's still important to do it gradually, because if it is too much, you're just going to be like, I barely understand everything that's happening. Why would I spend all my time in this language? Whereas if you kind of like replace each aspect of your life one by one, you're going to be eased into it. And I think that's just something in general that I'm learning about with my life, of just like gradual and therefore sustainable like transitions in your life.
You've been big on this lately, and it seems like it's working.
I mean, straight up sustainable transitions. Like, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm trying to go zero waste, and it has become like add a few new things of like sustainability stuff and then get used to it, and then once I feel like I'm really doing all of those things without kind of needing to think about it, like once I started using handkerchiefs every time I needed one instead of ever reaching for a tissue, I was like, okay, this is like what I do now. Then I could add a new thing, like, I don't know what my newest thing is, but just kind of like one by one. So that way it's not like, oh yeah, you can't use any plastic ever again, because that's hard. And then you're just going to be like, I can't do this. It's too much. Whereas if you like start with a little thing, like start with handkerchiefs and not
switch
getting
to metal straws. Yeah, exactly.
Like, then after a while you're like, okay, I'm ready to not use toothpaste anymore. I still use toothpaste. I just make it. Gonna throw that out there. But like now I'm gonna not use conventional toothpaste. Like, and then just adding different things, it like has made it a lot easier on me. So that's something I'd recommend in general.
That's fantastic. What else do we have left? We've got like 2 more chapters.
We can talk more about tracking activity, which I think is definitely important.
I think that's fantastic. And have you been tracking your languages this year?
I have.
Okay. Let's talk about that.
original video that I did during Fed. Go ahead and watch
I've seen that. I'm saying since then.
I was recommending it to everyone else. We have to get at least one self-promo in this book club chat. It's like the sponsored part of a like podcast or something, except we're not sponsored by anyone but ourselves.
But so how do you recommend going about tracking? Because this is interesting in that he has, I think, more so tracking individual courses that you're doing. Not, I wouldn't say it's more so how you do your language tracker, but I think there are benefits to both. Like I'm definitely going to go forward doing this.
I think I'm going to implement that other tracker that he does and do both. So I definitely think that there's a reason to do both of them. And I think in a sense I am tracking the way that he tracks. Like my summer goals update video is basically how he tracks. I just like looked it up before I filmed the video and wrote it down in a notebook and then talked about it in a verbal form instead of having a thing that I checked off as I completed it.
Gotcha.
So I do think I technically already do that. Do I do it more in the summer when I'm filming my summer goals videos? Yes.
Possibly, yeah.
And so possibly like implementing a written form of it where I can check things off during the semester would help me a lot. And even then carrying that into the summer where I can do that and have my videos. I think might help me a lot. I think tracking what resources I'm using is a good idea, as well as tracking the languages I'm using, because something I've gotten a lot out of tracking the languages that I'm doing is not just holding myself accountable to doing a language every day, but also seeing what languages I'm studying.
Yes, this is important, because if I'm going to study a language, I typically go right to German, and it shouldn't always be like that. Like, I need to give my German a break, give some attention to other languages.
Exactly. I mean, that's more so something if you're only learning one language, obviously tracking the activities that you're doing is still applicable, but especially if you're learning more than one language, I think
it's important to see where your energy is.
Just a language tracker in general and seeing what languages you're doing, because it's easy to study just German for 2 weeks and forget that you're also trying to learn Spanish, or study just Spanish and forget that you need to keep up with your German as well. So I think
I give like way too much attention to certain languages and not enough to others, and this is I think this is a great way for me to be like, to just see where my energy is going and to look like, oh, I'm very much neglecting my Norwegian. I haven't touched it in like a month. Let's do something there. Because it's great,
even if you can't give attention to all of the languages you study every day, then you can at least see like, oh, I am not ever studying Spanish like every other day. Like if you're learning 2 languages, German and Spanish, you can then be like, okay, I did German 2 days in a row, so I'm going to do Spanish, and then I'll do German, and then I'll do Spanish. And just kind of make sure that you do both of them if you can't do them both on the same day.
Make sure there's a balance.
Yeah, and so then I think there's definitely a benefit to keeping both a tracker of what language you're learning, as well as then the content you're doing.
No, me too.
Content-wise, I think it's the same thing. It's very easy to fall into, oh, I only ever read. And while there is the content chunking of, like, I should read just this book and finish it up, I think it's important to kind of also, he mentioned, like, the synergy of, like, all 4 parts of language learning and making sure you keep all of them in. So I think it's not bad to realize, like, oh, I read all last week, so what I'm gonna do today is like listen to a podcast. Like I'm gonna take a pause because my listening's probably deteriorating a little. I think as long as you're not trying to fit all 4 skills like into one 30-minute study session, when like you're gonna get overwhelmed because you're like, I have to do all of these things that are all gonna take 30 minutes, and instead just kind of making sure that you're keeping up with the 4, maintaining all 4 of the aspects.
There you go.
I guess other things, I really liked that he talked about how the emphasis is always on learning languages, and there's very little stuff on like maintaining languages, because I definitely agree, and that's definitely been something Matt and I have both been struggling with.
This is why I love this book so much, is that it's not just on learning languages. It does focus on that, but it's like, all right, you're gonna keep it, you know?
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Definitely been something I've been struggling with, and I know I've talked to you about it, and you've been struggling with it.
This has been a big theme for us this year, I think.
We've like learned languages, and then it's so hard to keep up with maintaining the other ones, and then there's no really resources on that. There's so many resources on like add another language in 3 months, or like how to learn like this language really quickly, and it's like that's great and all.
That's great, but it doesn't help.
Now I'm at 7 languages. How do I not forget the other? How do I not forget these 7?
At 7 languages and deteriorating, you know?
Yeah, because it's like this year I don't even want to add languages. I want to really focus on getting myself to the point where I'm maintaining and improving languages.
I've made the mistake of adding ancient Greek, but I enjoy it too much to drop it. But
but still, I feel like even with just maintaining, not even adding anything else, I'm still like, this is so
it's so much.
confusing. I don't know how to keep up with all of these.
This is really a good base point to kind of launch off of, you know?
Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate this book providing some tips for that. And then the like last thing that I really wanted to talk about
is it the project management type thing?
Yeah. Also, he talked about viewing it as a project management thing, which was where I had also the realization of like, oh,
this was huge for me. This was like,
well, it was huge for me in the sense of like,
you have all your projects.
Like I said, I do film and I do languages, and I also now
you want to start an Etsy shop. You have a bunch of stuff going on.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff going on, and it's like, why do you want to do all those things? They're so unrelated. But I feel like this was the point where I was like, oh, that's why. I like project management type things, I guess. Because the thing is like the aspects of film that I like, I think they're actually very connected
producing
to language.
Type things. Yeah.
I like writing, which is obviously communicative. I like writing dialogue and things like that. I like spend a lot of my life like observing people, and I think I have a very good hold on like reading other people and then using that to make like realistic characters. So obviously that's tied to language for obvious reasons. But then I think like the reason I like producing and assistant directing and stuff is therefore very tied to languages as well. I have to think about how to like this is more so tied to the language learning aspect, but like just kind of like thinking about like how to prioritize things and like that. I think that's kind of really connected. So I found that really interesting.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was just responding to a comment.
But
can I also add with the project management with the content libraries? What I'm very excited about is having content libraries that I can. He talked about putting all of his content libraries like on a table, and then he views the table as his language learning journey or like project, and then all of the languages are parts of that whole, and he can kind of see where he is and where his energy is going. And just, I absolutely love that. And I think it makes it so much more tangible than this abstract idea of, oh yeah, I think I'm about here in my language learning, I should do this, that, and the other thing. It makes it so much more direct and attainable.
I do want to throw in a comment that, while I agree this book was more helpful than the book you're speaking about, that was book club number 1 and not the previous book club. We did have a book in between there.
Oh, yeah.
Just to clear that up for anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also then another thing is just talking about prioritizing the languages, like not just prioritizing languages in your life, but prioritizing
languages above one another.
Order, which I did for my summer goals video. Gotta slide that promo in one more time. But prioritizing them and then being flexible, which I think is a big thing for me that I've talked about.
And starting
before.
slowly.
The schedule to work is like that. I need it to be flexible for my life. But then the way that he explained how to get this to work is another thing that I was like, I figured out how to fix all my problems. Because it's just another thing that for some reason I haven't thought of in this exact way, but it's exactly how I need to think about things.
Yeah.
I think it was one of those where I was like, this is slightly connected to things that I've thought of before, but put into so much better words that it's definitely what fits for me as a person.
I had a lot of that here.
But I also hadn't thought of it ever. So it was like a great new idea that also completely fit with me. And that was like having a tier system essentially.
Yes, I knew you were going to talk about this.
So like tier 1 is what you're going to do daily. Tier 2 is a fixed rotation. So that means like every Wednesday, every Thursday, let's say you do it, or you do it like every morning or every night, something like that, but something fixed. So whether it's like during your lunch every day, or whether it's like every Wednesday, it's fixed. And then 3 is like flexible rotation. So basically like when I have time, it's like that sort of thing. Or like if you wanted to get
it's on a longer rotation,
like,
essentially
connected to something else, maybe you could be like when I go for a walk, but maybe you don't know when you go for walks or whatever.
Yeah.
But he basically talked about it in terms, like you said, with the student who also wanted to play pool and like
learn piano
and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like put all of your hobbies into this kind of like tier system, and then like apply that to your life. So perhaps like perhaps tier 1 is like the language you really want to focus on studying, and it's also school, I guess, like schoolwork. And then tier 2 can be things like working out. Maybe you work out every day, or I guess that would be daily, every other day, I guess, let's say, or something like that.
And then you can also put another language there.
Yeah. So it's just a very interesting system that I think I want to apply, because while I think I've prioritized my languages, and I sort of know where those go in my tier system of like life things, I think I haven't really prioritized my other hobbies. I think I've prioritized, like, I know like school is a priority, and then like where like hobbies like YouTube and like other things kind of fall into that. But I haven't like gone deep into it, like where does, like, I'd like to read more, like where does that fall into my tier?
No, yeah, absolutely. I totally identify with that.
Always read every day.
Yeah.
Like, can I fix it in with something like every time I eat breakfast I read, and then also can I then put a language in there as well? Like, can I read a book in French?
Yeah, exactly.
Things like that.
That's something I haven't figured out yet, and I think this is going to be really interesting to try, because I like to read and write, and I don't do those consistently. But if I had those be a flexible tier, then I can also incorporate exercising and getting my languages in there, and like having this hierarchy of prioritization that will just help me get everything done and make sure that I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
This book gives you so many tools that I just need to reiterate that, like, this is one of my favorite books that I've read so far. And even if you think like we've given you so much information from it on this podcast, it really
we're definitely skimming through it.
We totally are, and there's things we've skipped. So it's very quick read.
It's worth reading, even if you're not like maybe someone who's trying to maintain a ton of languages. I think it's just very helpful.
It gives you so many tools for productivity.
First language, and you're still like actively studying it all the time and not even maintaining it. I think it's good for the future for you, and I think it's even a great book. Some of these tools, perhaps they exist in other productivity books that I just haven't read, because I haven't really read a lot of non-ranked productivity books. I want to start doing more of that, because then I'm sure it can be applicable for languages. But I feel like a lot of things can obviously be used in your life, even if you've never learned a language. This tier system idea of like daily fixed rotation and flexible rotation, that's obviously stuff that can be applied to learning an instrument, or even just other things. Like, I feel like you could even implement like your social life and things like that into you can really kind of keep up with all aspects of your life in this system. And obviously, like, again, be flexible with that. Like, don't be like, my life is dedicated to this tier system.
No,
but
yeah,
I
definitely.
think it's just a way to, because also he even says be flexible. Like, if you're then like, I really just am feeling German right now, like, it's okay to
just do it,
even if it's tier 2 or whatever. But
yeah, you shouldn't make your life obey the tier system. It should serve you. You shouldn't serve it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But I just found it super helpful. And then again, starting slow, like adding one thing at a time, which is kind of where I've been. It's been, I managed to get myself studying languages every day. So now it's seeing how many I can study at once, but adding one at a time. And also, since I've kind of like made languages a consistent thing in my life, now I'm kind of trying to start making like exercise a consistent thing in my life.
Yeah. Trying to balance everything you want to do.
Yeah, and I think definitely the way to do it is just to start one at a time, because I feel like I've kind of done like languages. Now I've gotten really good at keeping up with like YouTube stuff. Like we've posted, I guess, 2 videos and are come back to weekly posting, but I've been editing.
But yeah, that doesn't include all the editing time that we've had, all the planning, you know.
So I think it's just like the trick is just adding a few things at a time.
Definitely. All right. Yeah, I don't know what else I need to say here. I just absolutely love this book. There's a link down below if you'd like to buy the ebook or the paperback version. Both are available at kumabrand.com/shop. Robin's YouTube channel is down below. Definitely go subscribe to him, because he's got some very high quality videos, and just a lot of the information included in his book he talks about on his YouTube channel, which I like genuinely just discovered after reading this book, and I love it. And he's also got a Patreon over there if you want to support him. We will also have links down below for us if you don't already follow us, which you probably do. But thank you guys.
The other thing is I meant to have a book to announce in this video. I asked in the Discord for recommendations, and no one got back to me.
Yes, Andy got back to you. There is someone who responded
I
to you,
didn't
Abigail.
see it. I'm so sorry.
You're so rude.
But I guess so. I'll post again the next book club book in the Discord, and if you're watching this video in the future, I'll have it in the down bar as like the next book club book.
And we'll announce it on Twitter, Instagram. We'll do other stuff.
We'll announce it on Twitter. So if you are watching this now, only 5 hours ago. Okay, that's why I didn't see it. But yeah, so if you guys have recommendations for books, we've read 3 books now by men, so trying to scoot on over to not a book by a man.
Want to get some more diversity in there.
We're gonna try to get a little diverse this next time around, so if you have book recommendations, please let me know, and I'll announce it soon.
Yep.
And we'll see you next book club. I think what's happening book club wise, because also I know it's been a little bit like we keep having to push off the book clubs.
The monthly book club podcast that happens every 2 months.
Every 2 months. So what I think is going to happen, and I might have this next one be another month or something, depending. I need to like look at the way Matt and I's schedule is going to work. But I think what might happen with book club is having it be like a quarterly thing. So every 3 months we meet as a book club. Obviously, it probably won't take anyone 3 months to read the book, but then you have whichever month is easiest for you. You can read the book in. Also, it really allows a lot of flexibility for the live stream and things like that. And just it can often be a lot for Matt and I on top of like editing all the videos
and being at school.
Reading the book and taking enough notes to kind of have one of these. So I think for now, while Matt and I are full-time students, book club might become like a quarterly thing. If you guys have opinions about that, I would like to know, because I do want this to be like an interactive thing, obviously. So if you'd prefer for it to be like every 2 months instead, I think that's probably pretty doable. But I think for a lot of people it might be a little bit more helpful to do quarterly, because that's less books you need to buy. You got a little bit more odds of being able to make it. It might encourage more people to jump in. Like I think it might
if they've got more time to read the book.
So if we're all good with quarterly, I guess I don't know when our next one would be. I'll need to figure out how it will fit in with the months of the year.
Probably like October. That sounds like a long time away.
I feel like we'd probably actually meet next in maybe October. I'll see how it works, but I'll get back to all of you. People seem cool with that, so I guess we'll become a quarterly thing. Sounds good to me. More time for Matt and I to make other videos for you guys.
Definitely.
And more time for you guys to read the books. So
cool. All right. So thank you guys for joining us, and I guess we'll see you next Monday, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Take care, guys.